Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Matthew LaCroix, a passionate writer endowed with an adventurous, highly energetic, and kind-hearted spirit. Growing up in the outdoors of northern New England, a strong connection back to nature and the earth was firmly rooted into the morals of his life. He never forgot the important connection back to Gaia and devoted himself to embracing its very preservation and future. Now, Matthew is so passionate about what he does, he actually came out with a book called The Illusion of Us, The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness. And he has given out hundreds of copies of his work for free because he feels this information is that important. So he actually works a full-time job to get this information out to the public. How cool is that? Now, he reached out to us a few weeks ago at the Leak Project and expressed his desire to come on the show to get this information out there. And I felt that it was very important, so I wanted to get him on as quick as possible. Now, for those of you that follow us at youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord, that is our main channel of operations, we now have a cutting-edge website, leakproject.com, that is one of the nicest websites I've ever seen. And fortunately, it's now Leak Project. I wanted to give a shout out to Bilal. He's on the other side of the world, and he reached out to us at the Leak Project a few weeks ago because he heard a podcast that I did saying we were looking for a good web developer. And I'm telling you what, this is just literally absolutely the coolest website I've ever seen. So I'm really glad to be a part of this. Now, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're got a lot going on right now. How the heck are you?
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm awesome.
Fantastic. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show about what this book actually is, and you kind of put together a real quick reference of other people's works and compiled it all in one point here. I was wondering if you could just give our audience a description about yourself, a quick bio, and then we'll segue from there into this work and why you feel it's so important.
Great. Yeah, so I'm, as you read the description about kind of who I am, I'm your outdoors guy who just really enjoys hiking, kayaking, biking, just anything that's outdoors. But I also really enjoy, the interactive online experience of various the truths that can be found through the virtual world we have available on the internet. So I do spend a lot of time on the computer, but I try to balance it as much as I can with being outside. And when I was coming to a lot of these discoveries, like most people do, when you're kind of learning the truths of everything, I realized that there wasn't a lot of compilations that had been done. There was authors who would focus on one side or another, and it was very risky to try to do a compilation because that means you would have to get the entire thing right. What I mean by a compilation is I mean connecting both ancient history and our current history with kind of the social structures of what has been done with consciousness, like the book describes, and also kind of how to break out of a higher, getting a higher frequency and learning kind of the truths of things, and things like looking into the future of our own humanity on this planet. I wanted a compilation that can put together everything to be a stepping stone guide, so that people that want to say, like, I want to start somewhere, but I don't know where to start. Well, it'll point you towards things like the Dogon people, or then it'll look towards some of the pyramids of the Giza Plateau and some of the secrets that have been held, and it'll take you on that road where instead of just focusing on one area and then saying, well, that's great, but then you don't know where to go. It gives you a stepping stone guide to maybe find out where to go next.
Okay. And you also, when we talked, you said you feel that this work that you've put together is pretty much unique in the way that there hasn't been a single work that's hit on so many subjects.
I think David Icke has maybe put a larger piece together, but I don't of the same type of thing, but I think it's like 400 pages or something, and I think it deals into some deeper aspects of it. It's not really a pickup guide for someone that wants to get into some of these truths. And there may be a few other things out there that touch on it briefly, but I haven't really come across something that does ancient history. Then it goes into things like frequency, the specifics of color frequency, and learning about, and then the deep social values of what kind of we get brought through in our public schooling and everything. I don't think there really is that whole compilation, and so I wanted to do it. And if there is, then it just could be one more that can help all those people out there.
Okay. Now, and you also put together some really cool charts and diagrams, illustrations for us, and I was wondering if you could share that with us as we walk through this presentation. I guess the first thing we could jump into, if this correlates with your slideshow, is consciousness. I'm fascinated with the thought maybe your consciousness is your soul. It is your essence, and that's why we experience what we do. We go through the trials and tribulations, living in this duality, this bipolar universe. And maybe it's to get this education to expand our consciousness. You know, I mean, you look at other things out there like plants, rocks, minerals, elements, everything has some type of consciousness. Even all the experiments that they've done on plants, where if somebody goes and cuts a couple of leaves off of that plant, and then there's certain vibrational frequencies that machines can pick up when that person does it, well, when the plants will actually be able to pick up on that person's energy when he's within a certain amount of feet. I don't know exactly how many feet away he has to be, but then these plants will give off that same energy. It's just fascinating. What is your thoughts on consciousness?
That's really the kind of the root of this whole book, and it revolves around how, as you can see, the suppression and evolution, but really it revolves around how our state of consciousness has been stolen from us. And I just want to give a shout out to this art here that I have on the screen, because it dives into the very essence of what your question really represents. Because a fantastic artist I came across, Mark Peterson, helped me design this, and we designed the essence of what a red and blue frequency represents for our human consciousness. And we're gonna have a lot more charts and things that go through what that really means. But what it really does break down to is essentially how we can function and how we can actually even have an elevated conscious level. And so what it gets down to is, I think the essence of what we are is just simply energy with various states of consciousness. And as you become more aware of yourself, you simply raise your conscious level. So I believe that everything is rooted in your conscious level at that point, and the different levels of awareness you have. And so we'll get into some of those complexities of how consciousness has been tricked into making us not even know that it even exists, and that it's maybe just an apparition and creation of the mind.
So what is your thoughts then on the spirit and the soul?
Well, I believe that the spirit and the soul is essentially the essence of who we are. It's the deepest level of the fabric of somebody. I've talked to people who believe that a person is here and they're just, whatever their environment and their conditioning is will directly translate into who they are. And that's true on many levels. But I think there's an essence of what somebody is. You've met some child somewhere who comes from the same family as another loving family, but they're, just a deeply loving child who is just, they're just different than they're different than others. And we need to recognize that there are different souls that within us. There are different kinds of people. Some are maybe perhaps more loving, and some are perhaps a little bit more confused or darker. It's all different levels of consciousness that are here, coming back and forth, trying to relearn experiences and trying to ultimately reach that highest state of being that you can.
What is the highest state of being to you?
Well, that's a really good question. If anybody's seen the movie Lucy, there's some interesting aspects in that where reaching 100% state of brain capacity could just literally disappear and turn the matter into something where you couldn't literally not even see it anymore, where you could control matter. And so it becomes a situation where what is enlightened? What's the enlightened point? What's the point where you can say you become that enlightened being? I don't know, and maybe we're not supposed to know, because that's how important we are. Maybe our highest state hasn't even been made available to us yet because of everything we've gone through. And I believe that we have a lot of incredible things that are waiting for us in the future if we can get through some very exciting and changeable times in the next few years.
I mean, we're certainly going through some fascinating times, and if you look at, we're either at the cusp of something great or something terrible. And I feel it's up to people like yourself and others, many that listen to Leak Project here are so well educated, astute, and awake. It's nice to know there's people out there that are in the know. It's funny, Matt, because I took Uber home the other day because my car's in the shop, and the guy that picked me up was a real nice gentleman. He started talking about how he has it's weird how I bump into people that have like these top security clearances with the military or whatever. I'm like a magnet to these people somehow, even when I get picked up with Uber. And the guy starts talking about how he works with the Air Force and kind of does the stuff that people do on NCIS, but at a much more global scale. And we were talking about politics, and I was picking his brain as much as I could. And it's interesting that I do feel we're at the cusp here where many people that have the keys to the kingdom, because they've been given them because of their specific positions, whether it be in the military or the government or working for a corporation of some sort, and they have a choice. I mean, but the problem is they're so compartmentalized, and they're so indoctrinated, it's really difficult to break out of that. So, it's people like you and others that need to reach out to those and wake them up and just flip the switch so that they can make the decision for themselves.
I think that the more and more people that come out and start wanting truth and asking for truth and saying we demand truth, the more and more support there is. It's basically like a snowball effect. People are not willing to come out if they're just the few people, because there's so much online, there's so much they have to lose. And so the more and more that come out in support of that, and the more and more say we believe in you, we support you, and we want to know the truth, the more of those higher end officials, the more of those people who have real answers from actual documents and actual clearance are going to start coming out. And I believe there is going to be a giant flood of information in the future, because there's going to be a tipping point. That's one of the things I talk about in the book, how human consciousness is like water inside of a simmering pot on an oven. And it was never made to be held inside the oven. No matter how hard you hold that top down, the water is going to just get hotter and hotter. You can't do anything, and eventually it's just going to blow over. And that's what I feel like the truth of disclosure of everything is going to eventually be. It's just going to be and it's up to them how slow they want to do it. And that's, you can kind of see that in media and some things slowly giving us these little bits of truth. I think it's part of that trying to work its way up to this point. So it's not just a giant, bomb dropping.
I mean, there's many reasons the media does what it does. It's a multifaceted machine. It's one of the most powerful forms of mind control on the planet. I mean, even myself, I've been studying the media now for over 20 years, and I know exactly what it does to people subconsciously as well as consciously. And it's just such a powerful tool. But even that, I know how much of an influence media and the TV has had on me. I mean, just think for a moment about whenever you reference something in your mind, you think about something you're doing. You're like, okay, right now I'm walking the dog, or I'm riding my bike, and I'm thinking about a conversation I had with somebody earlier in a situation. How often do you relate that situation that you're in to a specific TV show that you saw, or a movie, or a film, or a documentary? I mean, just our reference points. So maybe that's one of the things that I need to do, is just throw the darn TV out the window as much as I want to use it to understand, okay, well, they're coming out with something on Fox News saying that Iran's the enemy, or that North Korea is going to nuke us. I know darn well that that isn't really what's going to happen, but I know the underlying tone and why they bring that out to the masses to get people freaked out, because you have that fight or flight mode where you've got people in constant fear, and it's easier to sell products and control the outcome of that situation.
The deepest aspect of the suppression side that if you read this is fear. Fear is itself is the ultimate control that we have on this planet of everyone, and that's like you said, through the media is the number one way that's transmitted through us, since that's how we get most of our interactive connection, or we used to at least. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's just interesting, and we can just jump into a couple things here, is you just segued into that beautifully, is that a state of fear will exist in the lowest state of consciousness that a human being can exist in. And so you start thinking to yourself, well, if there's a great lie here about what we should be doing here and our history and about everything, if there's a great lie, what better way to control the entire world but keep them in the lowest state of consciousness they can possibly be in, through a state of fear, which is a red conscious level. And I can show you that in a minute, how those frequencies directly relate to how we function in the outside world.
So yeah, it is. It's that vibrational frequency. Keep people in a very low state of consciousness by this fear factor. So you've got this picture here, the key to understanding life and consciousness, red and blue frequencies. Let's talk about that.
Okay, great. So here's a nice little image here. These are just images right off of Google Images. They're just basic, but they're just easy to get an idea of comprehending these things. I find one of the best things is actually just simplicity when you're talking. That way it's just easy to grasp it here. So when we're sleeping, we're in this central point, because we're at a neutral state, as long as we're not having some kind of horrible nightmare. But we're in this neutral state where we're in a state of dormancy while we're asleep in various states of REM. And when we wake, every human being on the earth, when they wake up, they either wake to end up in a state above, in a blue state of consciousness, or in the state below, in a red state of consciousness. See, one of the things that gets interesting is you mentioned how the media kind of seems like it dictates everything we do. And if you look around and everywhere, in sports teams and in colors everywhere throughout, it's always been red versus blue. Star Wars, in everything, it's always been red versus blue. It's been like this driven thing inside of us that nobody really knew what it meant. And they just, all they really knew was on the linear surface was blue represented good and red represented bad. That's just what it's always been. But what it represents on a fundamental level is literally the key to everything. And that's why I made the book those two wings of red and blue, because it determines literally our state now and the state of everything in the future. And so right here, what this means is your functional vibration level here. These are your wavelengths. It means it's how you vibrate, your energy vibrates in the world. And that is going to be directly translating into how you absorb and intake information and what level your consciousness will function in. Now, the majority of the world exists in a red frequency at the bottom, and that's on purpose. That's not just, we grew up in a barbaric society by accident and we somehow ended up in a red frequency. We'll learn later as I show some more slides. We do not belong in a red frequency. We should not be in one. It is, if someone exists in a red frequency, it is slavery. It is mental slavery. And the job of breaking out of red frequency, when you say someone is awake, it literally means from shifting from a red frequency state to a blue frequency state. And as you can see, if you look at the top, the wavelength between the waves as it goes across is about 3 times as much or 4 times as much between waves as the red shift below. And that relates to our vibrational functioning here, how we function. So if you think of a battery, right? If the human being exists in a state of a battery state, then if 100% represents our full capacity and what we should exist in, okay, the blue state at the top would represent 100%. That's what we should exist in. That's where you should be. That's where you should be. The red state at the bottom would be like 20% of what we really should be. It's like we're basically dumbed down versions of ourselves, and we don't know that because it's not known. If you go on and look up red and blue frequency, you can only find like a couple images that show this. It's almost like they've all been removed. It's very interesting, actually. So let me go on to the next one. This is just showing you white light. Everything is made up of light. It is a stage of matter. It is our vibrational frequency exists in these various frequency states that exist in light. So every wavelength of light you see coming out of white light, the source of light, exists in these colors. Now, isn't it fascinating to look where blue and red exist on the spectrum? Virtual complete opposites of each other. That's the first thing that's fascinating to look at, right? Mm-hmm. And so immediately you start to see that there's this competition within light that isn't really a competition, but it's been made to be one. And just going further, and then you say, okay, well, light is just light, right? Isn't light just light? Well, light is not light. Light has properties that people aren't even aware of. There are things that are being held back from public schooling that are almost as important as knowing how to cross a street, like the fact that color frequencies have their own unique heat properties. And that gets into, of course, the functional state of a human being. And so as you can see, as everybody would know, within their own kind of morals of themselves is blue would be cooler. We think blue, okay, cool, right? Mm-hmm. And red, alert, warning, red, that's hotter probably, right? But we don't really know that. If you ask someone that, they probably wouldn't tell you that, but it's just kind of somewhere in their subconscious. And it's interesting. So like, here's an image that shows how this translates into the real world. And I wanted to get a comparison with each other because you don't see it very often with each other in these various states of vibration. So here you have the red state of vibration exists in a molten state. It is in a hot state. It is in a high CO2 environment. It is in a slow oozing state. That is all vibration that exists in that state. That is the state it exists in. Okay. Now, in snow, obviously, is the total opposite. Snow is in that crystalline state where, if you have a snowfall, it's literally 10 or 12 to 1 what the rainfall would be, because you get that freezing factor of expansion. Because it's expansion, it's the total opposite. And so this is an amazing chart that I want to show. Because if you look at our planet, one of the things that I go in the history section to work up our understanding of our history and how we've been misled to learning about what really is kind of the fundamental two species that exist really on this planet that are dominant. You could even possibly say this galaxy or the universe, as far as we know. There seems to be two dividing intelligent species, the reptile and the mammal. It all comes down to these two dividing lines. And going back really quick to the spectrum, if you look at white light and what separates both sides, you would see that the reptile would exist in the red state and the mammal would exist in the blue state. And the immediate thing that strikes you is that they're on the opposite sides. Okay, so I think this chart shows some important information that maybe is known a little bit on the surface, but not really deeply understood. The first place we should start is if you look at the Earth's history and we compare, the time that human beings have been here versus the time that other species have been here that we know of, like dinosaurs, which obviously fall into the reptile category. The planet used to be existing in a much warmer climate, and dinosaurs existed here for hundreds of millions of years. I mean, we try to put that into a framework of our comprehension. Even the craziest, as they call them, timeliners of humanity for, if we wanted to conclude some kind of an ancient Atlantis and go back, we wouldn't even get to a million years. We wouldn't even get close to it. And yet we're talking about dinosaurs being here for hundreds of millions of years. And one of the things I think is very lost on people is not realizing that dinosaurs did not go extinct. They simply became like most things we have, like birds and all the crocodiles and all those things that are here. They're dinosaurs. They just changed. They never went anywhere. It's just a
Right.
perception. It's a perception of them that they went somewhere. And so what you then have is if you think that way and you say, okay, so there's dinosaurs, reptiles, and then there's mammals. Well, and you have things like insects and things, but those don't represent like highly intelligent, dominant forces that can have impacts like these two can have. You think of dinosaurs that weighed 100 tons, or a mammal that weighs tons. So we're talking about enormous animals, and so these two divergent species represent, from what we can see, most life that's impacted this Earth on a large scale, and intelligent life for that matter. That's the most important thing to say is species that can reach a higher state of intelligence. Now, in that early dinosaur period, this chart represents the temperature profile of where these species would exist in their optimal functioning level. When a species exists in its optimal functioning level, they are able to excel and reach evolutionary states. See, the biggest misconception is that evolution happens in this Darwinian cave aspect of just limbs and stuff, growing some extra, leg somewhere or some extra wing or something. That's just ridiculous and silly because that happens over such a huge amount of time. And what we're talking about is we're talking about the evolution of something like an intelligence, the evolution of the brain, which can happen in larger sequences depending on the species. In reptiles, this seems to happen over very, very, very long periods of time, millions of years. Whereas in mammals, it seems that this can occur quite much, much quicker, much faster. And so right there, you see there's kind of a competition right away, right? It's interesting if there are these two intelligent sides and they're both kind of race in the universe and they're like racing towards this higher state of being. That's kind of, and one represents red and one represents blue because it's their state of being. That's where this ancient red-blue thing has come from. And it's always been there. Luke Skywalker fighting against, Darth Vader with a blue lightsaber versus a red lightsaber is simply symbolic to try to tell us this all along. And we're just unable to see it because it's kind of one of those things where it's been kind of hidden. And
Yeah,
so,
I think that the red and the blue colors, obviously have been passed on. The importance of color has been passed on in many secret societies, mystery schools, and other
yes.
forms of the occult. And when I say the occult, that just means the unknown. And now you're bringing it to people's attention as a scientific approach, not a mystical one.
Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. According to the Freemason teachings, their fundamental belief was that the red versus blue conscious state, if we look at that, because we're looking at a human standpoint of our consciousness, we're mammals. If you look at that, it represents this ancient battle, like I said, red versus blue, but also the other side of it, light versus dark. It is essentially the Freemasons compared red versus blue as the exact same thing. It is the exact same thing as light versus dark.
Well, that's kind of
It is the yin yang all along.
right. That reminds me of many of the tile floors in Masonic lodges are black and white, 50% black, 50% white, and that represents, as you say, the yin, the yang, the polarities, the opposites, and the dual universe that we
Yes.
live in.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. And this is where it's going to start getting, maybe some people will start, maybe looking up and thinking about this. If you look at the human brain is broken up into two very distinct lobes, the left and the right brain. They represent basically the reptilian analytical side, our left brain, with our mammal, our intuition, our emotional side, the right brain, which represents, of course, red and blue, and represents light and dark, which is why all along, literally, if you want to just jump to the end of enlightenment, the yin yang symbol that just people put on their car and stuff, they don't really understand what it means. It literally means reaching an equilibrium balance within the brain of not having your ego and not having your left brain dominate. But by reaching the balance of both having red and blue, you literally reach that. Remember that royal color purple that they always talked about in royal colors? That represents the fusion of the two colors balancing.
Well, and take this a step further. If you look at many cultures, religions, and society, you can go back thousands of years. Many of these specific dogmatic religions, and when I say dogmatic, that just means has to practice certain, initiations, principles, and orders at certain times, etc. That's kind of the, I guess you could put it as a system of objectives as far as being dogmatic. And you look at, let's say, the fundamentalist Christian religion and people that are very gung-ho on what is in the Bible, the Abrahamic texts, that would be, in my opinion, very pro-yin, very masculine energy. Even if you look at some of the stuff talks about how women don't really have nearly as many rights in the Old Testament. I mean, in the concubines and the, having to wear all these clothes over their face and stuff with these Muslim religions and the Abrahamic text. It's just interesting how if there was a balance there, I think that people would feel more at peace with each other.
If people find the balance, they will find every answer they've ever been looking for. They will find complete peace because the balance represents not allowing our left brain to dominate, which is and it's not anyone's fault. People like to say, oh, humanity did it to themselves. I don't really subscribe to that because even though they did do that to themselves, I think if you have a species who is being governed by an iron fist and is being told with all these things, do you really expect a widespread, just total polar opposite, and everyone being like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let everyone in my family die. I'm just going to let all my crops get stolen. War is not going to matter. We've been forced to have a left brain mentality through thousands of years of fear, through thousands of years of misery. We've been forced to have that stigma because of the idea that Darwin's theory on evolution, which is what led all of our entire society astray, is the idea that the capacity of the human species on planet Earth is supposed to be represented by dominating one another, by dominating and always being the dominant force. And in my book,
the conqueror.
Exactly. And in my book, I talk about how everything in society is molded around that structure of being the best, dominating one another. And that principle, if anyone's ever seen A Beautiful Mind, there's a great point where he's looking at this blonde and he's realizing that if they all try to go for the blonde, but by each of them trying to compete for the best one, they're all going to fail. And he realizes that all of these Darwinian theories of dominance, which he based on ants, by the way, all these theories of dominance were false, and it was to keep us in this complete false paradigm of our lives. And what Russell Crowe realized in A Beautiful Mind, he said that the only way for us to truly reach success within ourselves is to think of the best for ourselves and also the best for the group. So you think of, I want to be the best I can for me, and I want to see the best in them, and I want them to be the best. And so it's a collaboration of the best we can. And in that model of collaboration, we wouldn't be in any of this mess we're in now. Our entire society would be completely different.
Well, here's another thing to think about too. If there really is this reptile versus mammal, blue versus red, light versus dark, and it's the dual universe, and it's got to be completely balanced on both sides. Otherwise, if one gets more power than the other, would it not continue to gain power and momentum until it became completely wobbled and off-sided, tilted, to where it would actually have to start attacking itself and eating itself and destroying itself after it destroyed everything else of the other?
I like how you said that. That's an area I just have a lot of interest in. I'm fascinated by this balance aspect of the universe, where it's like this unfolding story, this narrative where duality is here, and it's like this darkness versus light and pulling against another. So because if you didn't have that, it would kind of just be boring, wouldn't it? It's like it adds everything to it. And so in this competition of reptilian versus mammal, if this is the dominant force in the universe of what can reach the highest state, and of course you can have variations of this based on your environment, but it's fundamentally rooted in the same thing. It's rooted in an analytical mind, developing as an analytical mind, and then governing over itself. Anybody seen the show Fringe? They show this amazingly. What a great show that is.
It's a classic. The series is great.
They show the idea of what happens if an analytical mind takes over all emotion and just becomes purely analytical. They will ultimately become a destructive force. And that is what generally, generally, the reptilian side is known for. And the mammal side is obviously known for more of a compassionate. It's one of those things where I think if you just watch a group of apes, not that we're as closely related to that as people think, but there's obviously been huge deviations. But if you look at apes in just the social environment, they just want to be in a family environment. They just want to be in a family setting where they don't want any trouble. They don't want war. And the reptilian side, because it bases itself generally has it's the dark side, right? It's falling to the dark side. It's if you end up your ego overcomes and you want to dominate, and you want to become the best and take over everything, that will eventually lead towards dominating others. And you brought up the point where what happens if this is offset? What happens if it's not balanced right now? Purposely is what I feel. Because again, I bring it back to a movie. Like Shakespeare said, all life is just a stage of everything. It's just a stage of matter. It's a grand stage because it seems like if you look at our movies throughout everything, it's always what? What happens? It's quiet early on in a movie, and then something dramatic happens where the bad guys always just are about to win. They're about to win. They overwhelmingly always dominate, right? That's the theme you see every time, like in Star Wars or anything like that. They're always dominating. They have the win. They're guaranteed to win, right? Everyone looks at that and they have overwhelming power over everyone else, and they're going to win. But what happens at the very last second? These blue underdogs always end up coming through because it seems like the way that the balance is supposed to be all along. And I find it could be fascinating because it directly ties into the mammal and reptilian state. What happens if they don't compete? What happens if they maybe collaborate, like what humans are?
Well, if you think about what we are as a whole,
Exactly.
we're both. I mean, we are the reptilian and the mammalian. We have the opportunity to be something even beyond that, because when you connect both hemispheres, then you have something completely new. You've created a brand new essence. And if you look at the people that control the world, these aristocratic leaders that seem to feed primarily off of this dark ecstasy, war, destruction, pain, suffering, keeping the masses down, keeping them propped up on a pedestal, whether it be fluoridization in the waters, pharmaceutical industrial complex, the medias, the educational systems, the stuff that's out there in many religions. It's just designed to keep people imprisoned within their own minds so that they won't expand their consciousness. And if you do believe in reincarnation and you don't get to that next level, well, maybe people are just a form of energizer batteries, similar to the movie The Matrix, except for they feed off of it more of this ethereal type energy, not necessarily per this, physical battery, but maybe it's a combination of both.
I like how you said that. Excellent. And I just want to show this, just what you said, two sides of light, because everything just comes down to light, right? Blue and red, and human beings represent the fusion of light. That's why we're called the creator's children, God's children, the source. They talked about in the Anunnaki, they said the word will give them, they'll realize they're gods like us. All throughout. It scared them because we are the conclusion of everything. We are what was supposed to be all along. This battle of reptilian and mammal brain coming together during what? During absolute chaos of ourselves, enslavement, and that's a whole other thing we can go into. The whole reason we're here as part of this complex aspect is that the idea that if Enki had never given us these gifts that he had given us of their species, we never would have ever reached any of the state we're in now. It's like this plan has been this plan all along, and we don't realize that it's a battle to try to not have us realize it.
Battle to keep many confused and searching for that carrot, that golden carrot at the end of the stick that's continuing to be pounced around. And now, so another thing too, I guess, is you're going to show the vibrational frequencies are actually different based upon the colors, which would affect the outcome and mood as well, correct?
Yeah, so when I say color, I'm not talking about color in the sense of what we think of as that looks like blue and that looks like red. So when I say color frequency someone exists in, you can even go and I call them red consciousness versus blue consciousness, because that's really what it is. Because the human being, yes, we have a reptilian side to us, this Anunnaki analytical side that we gave, all these gifts that we gave, and I want to emphasize, we wouldn't be where we are right now if it wasn't for those gifts. We needed those gifts. If not for this enslavement, we never would have had that fusion that we needed. It was so. If we look at the fact that, but on a fundamental level, human beings are mammals. We're in mammal states. I showed the representation of the relative energy it takes to exist in a certain temperature versus another. It represents the state of mind we exist in, also in the state of temperature we exist in. So it represents if somebody is very overweight, it's very difficult for them to exist in a blue consciousness, because not only is their mind not there, but their body is like us, is almost sickly, because it's not able to function in its optical form. I just want to go back really quick to this. Again, temperature is in energy. It comes down to our energy and temperature. A large person has a very warm internal temperature. They are then going to function in a red frequency. Everything comes down to both our physical state and our mental state. But the physical state has to lead to the mental state. Because if we are sick, if we have toxins from GMOs, from pesticides, if we have chemtrails spraying us, if we have fluoride in our water, preventing our pineal gland from activating, preventing all these gifts that we're supposed to have, if all of these things come together, not to mention all of our social development skills through public school and everything, all of that comes together, we're going to be existing in a red frequency. And we'll never even ever get to a state of even knowing what a higher state of frequency is. That's why enlightenment is then this occult knowledge, this hidden knowledge, has been just kept at the top, because the general masses, if they got it, it would truly it would represent ultimate freedom on the earth. This represents everything on the earth. If it represents our future here, right here. That's why I chose it as the picture. And if you look in the background, you see space. You see an eye right there that is purple, because that represents us finding fusion and reaching that ultimate next step.
And what happens when people start to wake up, become aware, if it gets to the point where these guys feel they're being pushed in a corner, and when I say these guys, I'm referring to the people that control all of these corporations and systems of dark ecstasy, like putting sweet poisons and sweet candy poisons and everything. You've got aspartame, acylfame, neotame. Now they've got phenylenolonics, which is, there's a warning symbol on most gums now saying that this contains phenylenolonics, which is a neurotoxin, and people chew on it anyway and say, so what? We're going to die someday. Who cares? Well, hey, that's fine if you want to go ahead and continue to chew on those neurotoxins. Be my guest. You've been warned. But they'll tell people. They let people know in the alternative media how bad that stuff is for you, and that's their way of being karmically unbound in their opinion.
We need to look at it as that is like one piece of an enormous matrix of suppression of consciousness. That's why the book is called The Suppression of Consciousness. What we're looking at is a targeting system that targets every aspect of our life. Look at foods. We don't eat organic foods anymore. There are things trucked across the country with all these pests, blah, blah, blah. That's one aspect. Then you go to medicine. Hijacked, turned into synthetic components to keep us dumbed down in our state. Nothing natural was used. You get the war on drugs, which is really targeting natural psychedelics. That's two. These are all things I underline as this enormous system to keep us unaware and in a red frequency. And the king of all of them is fear, because fear is like, no matter how healthy someone is, whatever it is, if you keep them in fear, remember I mentioned, it is the lowest form of consciousness you can exist in. And so if someone's in fear, even if they're happy, you can still be happy. You think happy, but be in fear. If you're in a country that's at war, but you live inside and you're in a farming community, you're still kind of in your own little state of peace, but you're in an overwhelming state of fear for your future, for the future of everything. And that's what everyone's in. It's not an immediate state of fear. I'm going to come stab you with a knife. It's a state of fear for everything in the future to keep you locked in a state so that you never wake up. It's the Matrix. It's the blue and red pill. Except I'd like to point out they actually got that wrong in the Matrix.
And they did that on purpose. What do you bet?
I think there it is. You touched on that, because one time you talked about a while ago, another talk, how what if you were to bring someone a bunch of truthful information and then just throw something in there that wasn't true to totally derail them? And I believe we have that in a lot of our media, in a lot of our systems we think are real. We'll see truth like that, like in the Matrix. I mean, you can't argue Matrix has probably more truth than probably any other movie made. And yet, here's this giant fundamental flaw and one of the most important moments in the entire movie, where you would choose the red and blue pill don't represent just waking up. It represents your whole state of being. It's like I described, it's everything. And what do? They get it wrong.
Let's add one more psyop to that if we can here real quick, Matt. You've got the Wachowski brothers that come out with some of the most incredible movies and mind-bending, thought-provoking films of all time, like The Matrix. And then you've got this transhuman movement that's really been being pushed. You've got the transhuman Bill of Rights now being pushed. And that's fine, right on. And now you've also got the transgender movement being pushed big time. Hey, right on. If you want to get a sex change and be a chick and you're already a guy, that's cool. If you're a gal and want to be a guy, hey, whatever. I'm not telling you that you can or can't do that. I just think it's interesting that all that stuff's going on in the media. They've got these what's his name, Kate now, or was spelled Cait, which used to be one of the greatest athletes back in the 70s, and on the Wheaties box, and now he's a she. It just seems like they're really pushing this mind screw. And if you're a little kid, you're growing up in an environment where you don't really know where your place is, and you feel kind of awkward around other people. And then you see all this stuff on TV about people getting sex changes, and then you think, well, maybe I should get a sex change because they're doing it. And then what if they do get that sex change, and then a couple years later they're like, well, did I really want to do that? It makes people, in my opinion, more confused with who they really are. And I really don't care what somebody's sexual preference is. I think they have the right to do whatever they want. I really don't care. I think it's who you are as a person. But it just seems like now all this stuff's getting mixed up to mess with people's heads. And the last thing I just wanted to add to that, because we're talking about the Wachovia brothers, do you know that they're now the Wachovia sisters?
Yes, I did. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting. You touched on some good things there. I think the whole thing is connected. It's all part of a social programming. It's a social programming. When we think of where we are as a culture right now, and we have all of a sudden this fashion comes out, oh, this music becomes popular, oh, this movie becomes popular. We don't realize that all of those things are chosen beforehand. All those things are predetermined for us. It's all a giant illusion. It is the illusion of us. It is the illusion of what we think everything in reality is. And if people want to know, Neo asks Morpheus, what is the Matrix? It is everything in our reality that we have been made to not believe is true, and also not made to believe that nothing is connected, when in reality everything is connected on a level of everything is connected, and everything is usually based on something real. And if people are trying to be kept from the truth of the greatest lie that's ever been told, these enormous lie about who we really are, about our origins, about this divine connection, that this we're literally like gods here, this human, the ending point of the universe. If all that doesn't want to be known from these rulers that are here, they would want to keep us in a state of complete unawareness as much as possible. And so I show cell phones, TVs, everything it actually emits out of it a red frequency. And you start to realize the entire world is every electronic device, all of TV with fear and war, it's all just a punishing red frequency. And you can go on an even deeper level. You go into social level structures on how people are raised. Men are not allowed to cry. Men are not allowed to show emotion, because emotion is what connects to the right brain, and it could literally help them complete and find the greatest balance, because men are what the system is ultimately controlled through to keep them in a state of the left brain forever. And then women are already in a right brain state, so they know they can't keep them in a left brain state, so they just keep them as just mothers, and they show endless birthing ads where they should have babies as much as possible, be ignorant, don't learn the truth, and we need to throw all of those antiquated morals we have out and realize that every individual has this incredible existence here where they can do whatever they want. If they want to raise a family, they can. But if they want to have an unbelievable adventure of traveling the world and learning about, the cultures or the hidden cultures of the ancient continents or some jungle somewhere, they can do whatever they want. They can have the freedom, but everything is dictated into. Then you get this model of work as many hours as you can and stay and then come home and be sickened. And so you start to see, what is the Matrix? Neo he asks them, he says, he has to show you. You have to literally see it for yourself. You have to see every part of these and then see it for yourself, and then realize it's this giant aspect of controlling us in this red frequency so we won't ultimately wake up. And I want to segue after this and show you this, because if you don't think that this is real, this will blow your mind. Because if someone was to follow the money, they always say, if you want to find the truth, follow the money, and that's it's always true, because money is what drives everything in the world. It is the evil driver of humanity. So, who are the controllers of humanity on a fundamental linear level? The Rothschild family. They have upwards of between $500 and $700 billion. Some say trillions of dollars. Everything on. And then, of course, we haven't even gotten into gold. The Rothschild family is still they still come out with the daily price of gold. And then you got to get into the whole Anunnaki connection. That's a huge, giant story that I don't know if you want to get into. But on this linear level, Rothschild, the name Rothschild, this elite family controlling all of humanity, from every corporation, every government, is controlled through this Rothschild family, these elites that are the 13 families of the Illuminati, which is essentially connected to the Rothschilds. Their name directly translates to mean Rothschild, red shield. They're trying to protect the red frequency here all along. And then you start looking at the Knights Templar, the giant red Christian cross. It's just like polluted everywhere. It's all around us. It's like screaming at us to see it. but we just can't because we don't think that anything's connected. And that's like the great trick that they played on us here.
That's a good connection there, and I like this actual illustration here where you show the two-headed dragon, the red.
Isn't that amazing? Look at that.
Yeah, that's cool. And then another thing too. I mean, you look at the Star of David or the crest of the Rothschild family, and you've got two triangles. You've got the as above, so below, connecting as one. So there's unity there. And if you know how to look at that symbolically, that's not a bad symbol at all. I mean, that represents many things. I mean, that represents, like I said, as above, so below. However, they've got all red in the shield. Why not have a, blue, 50 red, or a purple with a combination of both to create unity? It's because they, I guess, as you say, they're more proud of the red.
It is the ancient reptilian side. I mean, we're talking about this is embodiment of the ancient Anunnaki, ancient reptilian side. I don't want to put all the blame on the Anunnaki. There are several different factors and several different beings that are involved in this, and within these elite families of the Rothschilds, there are literally just these mad tyrants that took control of the planet. And what we need to understand is that there are also sides of these elite beings who want to see us advance ourselves, who want to help us. And that is this battle that is going on. There's a battle over us waking up versus them finishing what they started all along. All you have to do is take your wallet out and get a dollar bill and look at the back and see the unfinished pyramid, and how every single thing on the back of the $1 pyramid adds up to 13. All of the steps in the pyramid, all of the stars above the eagle, everything represents 13. It represents the 13 families. They've been there all along. The 13 families, and I encourage anyone to look into this yourself. It's as crazy as it sounds. When you don't have a basis for something, it becomes crazy because it's almost like, oh, how do you envision something that you've never seen before? So in looking at these things, if you start reading about them and you start looking at them for yourself, you'll see this family that it's been at the top all along, fueling both sides of each war, designing the banking industry. And then it's all very interesting to me that they still decide the daily price of gold. How fascinating is that? If you look into the history of the Anunnaki who came here, and the whole purpose was literally gold all along, and we're just a byproduct that came out of that. And so you look at states like Switzerland, these neutral banking states, their whole purpose is just gold. Money is just a manipulation here for us. And all along, it's literally just to have us accumulate gold, and it's just all these piles of gold all in these vaults. And when we look at that and we say, well, that can't be right. Then why do they still decide the daily price of gold today? Why does their name mean red shield? We have to start looking at these and really and realizing that there is real truth here, and there is a giant story.
I do have to add to that, Matt, because I think that it is a fascinating story, and you've put some really cool pieces together to create a really nice puzzle. And what I would like to add to that, though, is if they did come to Earth to get gold, whether it be for their atmosphere or monatomic gold for giving them longer lifespans, magical powers, whatever, that's great. But I think that maybe they found what was much more valuable than gold was us, was our actual spark, our spirit, our soul essence, and our connection to Source. They thought, man, let's not only enslave them physically, but let's see what we can do to harness their powers spiritually as well. It's like a megalomaniac.
Again, I don't want to give a blanket statement and say that all of them decided that, because what I've been looking at, and especially Gerald really talks about this well. He talks about how there are these factions. They call it the Enki-Enlil faction broken up, and you can even name names like Marduk and all these names that have come along. But we're talking about, it looks like the purpose all along was gold, and we were this byproduct. But then there was this decision made. There was this jealousy decided that here are these beings with this divine spark within them. And that's why I want to emphasize, you're looking at that color sheet in the beginning. That's why we're this prophesized, being all along, because we have that spark inside of us. And all along, cultures have talked about how all of these things that are done to us all throughout history, the only purpose all along, there's only one purpose, is to utilize our energy through trying to rid that spark from our genetics, from inside of us. Just get it out of us so that they can dominate us forever, and we'll never have any kind of an uprising. We'll never have any kind of a conscious expansion thought. And that's why the whole thing, if you look at where the more you call them the more renegade dark sides of these families that have control of everything, especially the United States and a lot of Europe. They essentially want just a one world order and to try to rid the world of all freedoms because they're trying to move towards that ultimate goal. At the same time, there's this counter to that, that as weak as it may seem, I overwhelmingly believe in my heart will win. I mean, humanity is waking up at a profoundly fast level, and I think that it's one of those things that it's gonna catch them so off guard that they know, I think, that it's a losing battle.
They know it's a losing battle. Guess what they're probably going to do? Boom! World War III. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just
well,
like...
they're trying to do that, but see, I think they have to have the will of the people to allow it, and that's the great struggle.
I mean, let's go to this for a minute. Have you seen the most recent season of House of Cards?
I have actually not.
Okay. Well, first of all, I know I brought this series up several times on the Leak Project, but I think that the acting and the characters play just such good roles. I mean, they fall into their characters so well. Kevin Spacey he's a genius when it comes to acting. And the very last episode here, I'm just going to throw out what they do. If this could be a spoiler alert, folks, if you haven't seen the last episode. But Kevin Spacey, Frank Underwood, he's the president, and he got put into power through corruption and anything under the sun you could think about to get in there, he basically did, him and his wife, Claire. But he's realizing that there's a good chance he could lose his control, his power, because the people that he's stepped on in the past that are still alive are getting together, and they're basically coming out on the record exposing what he's done. And so he can't shut him up anymore, and he can't whack him. So he decides, well, what do? We go to war. And that's why I think that it sounds great, man, and I hope you're right, Matt. I really do. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here. But with all the power and control and influence, and if you really think about it, it would take them literally a couple of button pushes in an office to cause mass chaos. It would take one bomb in a very highly populated area or an EMP somewhere. You shut off people's bank accounts for a week, and they're not going to give a damn about enlightenment anymore. They're going to want to find out how to feed themselves.
You know, it's interesting because I think that they know they're losing. They know that we're awakening incredibly fast. I mean, you look at what's happened last couple hundred years. It's unbelievable. And considering all the odds, too. That's what's so amazing about it. But I want to point this to you. When I keep bringing this back to being this grand story, I mean, the universe, and if you look at it as a timeline, it's like an incredible story. If you look at the whole story of us, if you really learn everything about where we've come from and where we are now, all the overwhelming odds we are of getting here and getting it. Do you really think the story is going to end like that? Just boom, and it's just gone. It's not going to.
No,
it's not going to do that because I know it is, because I know it inside me, and I know that would just be the worst ending in the world.
I think that would cause, if they did, I don't think it'd be a complete reset. I just feel that it would be, pushing us back 10 years, pushing people back a little bit. Kind of like 2001, when I think people were starting to wake up a little bit, and then all of a sudden you've got, boom, the towers go down, people freak out. They think it's Al-Qaeda with these magical box cutters that have this alien technology that are able to create, heavily fortified buildings to collapse within their own footprint. And, I'm exaggerating about that last part there. But, and then there's this all patriotic, everybody's all, oh yeah, man, we're in this together, everything's great. But they what they didn't realize is it probably wasn't, Bin Laden and his buddies, we all know that caused those towers to collapse and the Pentagon to get struck and stuff. So, I don't know. It's, certainly people are waking up now, and I agree with you 100%. And I wonder if they're allowing it.
That's it. You're looking at two forces fundamentally fighting. I mean, look at this in front of you. They are battling. They're battling for humanity not to decide their future, but for humanity to decide their future based on their predetermined outcomes of what they want it to be. And if we look at it in the fact that there is this race to try to get World War III started and to try to, and like you said, if they were to try to collapse the banking industry, there would be anarchy in a lot of places. But I believe that humanity has come so far since those days of us, throwing spears and wielding swords, that I think overall it would not lead to a state where we would all kill ourselves and go back to the reset button. I believe that there will be a time that's going to come that is going to challenge us. And I think it's made to get us to the next step all along. But I absolutely feel like if you look at everything that's going on and every way that it's going, and I really talk about this in the evolution chapter, it is going to be something that we come out on top of, and there will have to be a lot of people who realize this the hard way through very harsh crashing down realizations that their lives have been lies in many cases. And so the only thing we can do is be positive, because we cannot, if we try to foresee doom and think it's going to happen, we will destroy ourselves, because we are creating our own reality here through our enormous collective mindset of the earth. And so we need to stay positive, look at only the truths that are coming down. And right now I'm seeing really incredible future ahead of us in terms of how many all over the place are waking up, how many are seeing this, how many are deciding against fear, against war, against I don't want to go to war. And you mentioned 9/11 a lot. That tactic wouldn't work anymore because people would see it now. They didn't see it then, and now it's entrenched inside them as a very monumentous moment where America became all triumphant together, and that's way too hard to let go. But those things, if they tried to do it now with all the technology and all of the leakers and all the people, they wouldn't be able to do it. They overplayed their hand. They wouldn't be able to do that again. They overplayed their hand, and that will lead to exposing everything in the end. Everything.
Now,
9/11.
Right. Now, you remember the Boston Marathon and Sandy Hook and many of these recent, in my opinion, I think they're false flags and staged events because of the compiling evidence that shows that's very easily accessible. So maybe you're right. Maybe and I've heard this before too, that created a mass awakening, and it would be certainly much more difficult to pull the veil over everybody's eyes. Certainly the masses still possibly, yes. And yeah, you bring up some good points. So I appreciate your outlook on that. And you certainly do need to have a good thought process going into things, because your thoughts do create reality. So we need to remind people about that. And I thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, and it all comes down to, don't give in to the fear mongering that they create. Thinking about, yes, there may be events going on in the world. Make them known within yourself, and know that it's wrong. But don't let it hold you. Move past it and move to something that grows you. Anything that takes away from a state which advances you, and that could be negative. As I said, truth often comes with many, many negative realizations of things that have occurred here, and they can feel uncomfortable. But we must brave through them and realize them, because ignorance is our greatest means for our own destruction. Above anything else, it's not violence, it's ignorance, because ignorance means the truth is out there and we're choosing to ignore it, and we're choosing to allow this all. And then what happens is, by allowing all this and it becomes acceptable, it becomes the reality, and we don't even know what a state of freedom really is anymore.
Yeah. And Gerald, you brought him up a moment ago. He is definitely probably the most educated person I have ever talked to, especially when it comes to the Anunnaki and being able to reference certain names, God forms, deities, and just the way he puts it all together. The only thing that I would say that I think to add to what his work is, and I think he even might agree with me on this, is the soul, the spirit itself. If there's a way, technologically or metaphysically to harness that energy, possibly these guys have some type of control mechanism where they can kind of tap into that on a group consciousness at an archetypal level. You look at the songs that even came out, Ozzy Osbourne, you remember that song, the generals gather around their masses like witches,
yeah.
And he knew the whole thing back then too. So these global wars and stuff have definitely been kind of like a funneling source for these people, not only financially, but also possibly spiritually as well. So it's a battle, and you definitely bring up a good point. It's the dual universe that we live in. So will it continue to always be that way, or will we merge into the purple vibration like you mentioned?
Yes, and it comes down, again, back to this again. You mentioned, what if we have this essence about us, this soul about us that can be controlled? What if our consciousness can be controlled, and where we're not actually in control and we think we are? Maybe that's where vampires came from all along. All these concepts are not linear. They're trying to have us understand what's been real all along. Some of these beings, we'll say some of them, may be able to completely manipulate and control humanity through a person in a red frequency state only. Now, I want to make that clear. That is how somebody is able to be controlled. And that's why fear and violence, these mad kings, all the Romans, all these mad kings that just slaughtered and just had no mindset for any compassion in humanity, were literally these these corrupted beings. That's why it's like falling to the dark side in Star Wars. Again, it all comes back to these references. Be able to, if you exist in this red frequency state, you are not in control of your own destiny, and you are not in control of your own consciousness. And that is how humanity is led like sheep, because they're not actually really conscious. They're actually unconscious. That's why it's called a waking up. See, it all comes down to the same thing. So once you wake up and you achieve this higher frequency, this higher state of consciousness, you now have taken control of yourself. You have your own awareness of yourself, and you're now dictating your own reality based on deciding what you want to believe in. So once you do that, you then take over. You become your own God. You then take your own timeline into your consideration. And so that's what that all means. It's all just on levels for us to understand. We try to see things very linearly, but it's always like different ways to view things, different ways to understand things.
Right. Right. So I think that you've really done a good job explaining how to kind of break out of the typical reptilian control grid. And, so what's next for you?
Well, I'm trying to spread this book as much as I can, because I think it's a compilation that if people do sit down and they do look at it, and they're able to get through some of the hard things, because I don't hold back. I don't believe the truth should be governed based on the people feeling like something feels good or not. Truth is constant. I believe that to the heart of myself. It is the logos. It is a constant thing. If you discover truth, you need to tell it, regardless of what dark path it takes. And so I don't hold back. I connect Bohemian Grove, the Bilderberg Group. I connect all of these ancient bloodlines all the way back to Egypt and the pharaohs. I want this book to show the pain we've been through. The creation of war simply for a means of control and other purposes. I want to expose also the beautiful side of forgetting about our world and our universe. So I don't try to sugarcoat anything. I give it to you straight, but I also give it on as positive aspect as I can, to emphasize how amazing our existence is, and how incredible this world is that we're able to be here during that time, and the fact that most of us are simply unaware of any of this going on. And that's what's really amazing to me about all this.
Nice. Well, I certainly like your approach, and I appreciate the way you put everything together so eloquently. I hope that you'll continue to come up with these books and write new material, because this is awesome, Matt. And for those that have had an opportunity to listen to this podcast, make sure to purchase a copy of The Illusion of Us, The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness, Matthew LaCroix. Now, are you on Facebook? Do you have a website that people can get access to this, or is it better just to go to Amazon? Okay.
Sure. Go ahead, and if you're on Facebook, you can look up The Illusion of Us. It comes up very, very easily. You can obtain it through that, or Amazon. It's easy to find. And if you want to message me through any of those, if you really just are one of those people who, man, I really want to read this, but I am the system. I've been living outside. I have no money. I have no way to afford this. I will send you a copy. I want to provide this to anyone who wants to read it, because I believe in the fundamental truths that are within it. And so I will, and also I have a Facebook page too. You can always like me on that, or add me, and I'll try to connect and give this out as much as I can. I'm writing the next book I'm currently working on. It's called The Stage of Time. It's about how timelines, people don't consider their actions, and how a timeline can be, let's say, manipulated and altered. So it's about, it goes to kind of the next level on the next one.
No, that's fantastic. I certainly can't wait to read it. And I mean, I think you're only charging like $10 for one of these through Amazon, so that's an absolute bargain. I mean, it really is. This is some great material, and I certainly appreciate you coming on the show with us, Matt. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak with you again soon.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I would love to again.
Oh, fantastic. So, folks, once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us this edition of Leak Project. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/clandestine time lord. Also, make sure to check out our new website. I mean, this thing is awesome. leakproject.com. Thanks, Bilal. You are a godsend, my friend. I really appreciate you putting this together for me. And, folks, be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Good night. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Matthew LaCroix, a passionate writer endowed with an adventurous, highly energetic, and kind-hearted spirit. Growing up in the outdoors of northern New England, a strong connection back to nature and the earth was firmly rooted into the morals of his life. He never forgot the important connection back to Gaia and devoted himself to embracing its very preservation and future. Now, Matthew is so passionate about what he does, he actually came out with a book called The Illusion of Us, The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness. And he has given out hundreds of copies of his work for free because he feels this information is that important. So he actually works a full-time job to get this information out to the public. How cool is that? Now, he reached out to us a few weeks ago at the Leak Project and expressed his desire to come on the show to get this information out there. And I felt that it was very important, so I wanted to get him on as quick as possible. Now, for those of you that follow us at youtube.com/clandestine time lord, that is our main channel of operations, we now have a cutting-edge website, leakproject.com, that is one of the nicest websites I've ever seen. And fortunately, it's now Leak Project. I wanted to give a shout out to Bilal. He's on the other side of the world, and he reached out to us at the Leak Project a few weeks ago because he heard a podcast that I did saying we were looking for a good web developer. And I'm telling you what, this is just literally absolutely the coolest website I've ever seen. So I'm really glad to be a part of this. Now, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're got a lot going on right now. How the heck are you?
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm awesome.
Fantastic. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show about what this book actually is, and you kind of put together a real quick reference of other people's works and compiled it all in one point here. I was wondering if you could just give our audience a description about yourself, a quick bio, and then we'll segue from there into this work and why you feel it's so important.
Great. Yeah, so you read the description about kind of who I am. I'm your outdoors guy who just really enjoys hiking, kayaking, biking, just anything that's outdoors. But I also really enjoy, the interactive online experience of various the truths that can be found through the virtual world we have available on the internet. So I do spend a lot of time on the computer, but I try to balance it as much as I can with being outside. And when I was coming to a lot of these discoveries, like most people do, when you're kind of learning the truths of everything, I realized that there wasn't a lot of compilations that have been done. There was authors who would focus on one side or another, and it was very risky to try to do a compilation because that means you would have to get the entire thing right. What I mean by a compilation is I mean connecting both ancient history and our current history with kind of the social structures of what has been done with consciousness, like the book describes, but and also kind of how to break out of a higher, getting a higher frequency and learning kind of the truths of things, and things like looking into the future of our own humanity on this planet. I wanted a compilation that can put together everything to be a stepping stone guide, so that people that want to say, like, I want to start somewhere, but I don't know where to start. Well, it'll point you towards things like the Dogon people, or then it'll look towards some of the pyramids of the Giza Plateau and some of the secrets that have been held, and it'll take you on that road where instead of just focusing on one area and then saying, well, that's great, but then you don't know where to go, it gives you a stepping stone guide to maybe find out where to go next.
Okay. And you also, when we talked, you said you feel that this work that you've put together is pretty much unique in the way that there hasn't been a single work that's hit on so many subjects.
I think David Icke has maybe put a larger piece together, but I don't of the same type of thing. But I think it's like 400 pages or something, and I think it deals into some deeper aspects of it. It's not really a pickup guide for someone that wants to get into some of these truths. And there may be a few other things out there that touch on it briefly, but I haven't really come across something that does ancient history. Then it goes into things like frequency, the specifics of color frequency, and learning about, and then the deep social values of what kind of we get brought through in our public schooling and everything. I don't think there really is that whole compilation, and so I wanted to do it. And if there is, then it just could be one more that can help all those people out there.
Okay. Now, and you also put together some really cool charts and diagrams, illustrations for us, and I was wondering if you could share that with us as we walk through this presentation. I guess the first thing we could jump into, if this correlates with your slideshow, is consciousness. I'm fascinated with the thought, maybe your consciousness is your soul. It is your essence, and that's why we experience what we do. We go through the trials and tribulations, living in this duality, this bipolar universe. And maybe it's to get this education to expand our consciousness. You look at other things out there like plants, rocks, minerals, elements, everything has some type of consciousness. even all the experiments that they've done on plants, where if somebody goes and cuts a couple of leaves off of that plant, and then there's certain vibrational frequencies that machines can pick up when that person does it. Well, when the plants will actually be able to pick up on that person's energy when he's within a certain amount of feet. I don't know exactly how many feet away he has to be, but then these plants will give off that same energy. It's just fascinating. What is your thoughts on consciousness?
That's really the kind of the root of this whole book, and it revolves around how, as you can see, the suppression and evolution, but really it revolves around how our state of consciousness has been stolen from us. And I just want to give a shout out to this art here that I have on the screen, because it dives into the very essence of what your question really represents. Because a fantastic artist I came across, Mark Peterson, helped me design this, and we designed the essence of what a red and blue frequency represents for our human consciousness. And we're gonna have a lot more charts and things that go through what that really means, but it really does break down to is essentially how we can function and how we can actually even have an elevated conscious level. And so what it gets down to is, I think the essence of what we are is just simply energy with various states of consciousness. And as you become more aware of yourself, you simply raise your conscious level. So I believe that everything is rooted in your conscious level at that point, and the different levels of awareness you have. And so we'll get into some of those complexities of how consciousness has been tricked into making us not even know that it even exists, and that it's maybe just an apparition and creation of the mind.
So what is your thoughts then on the spirit and the soul?
Well, I believe that the spirit and the soul is essentially the essence of who we are. It's the deepest level of the fabric of somebody. I've talked to people who believe that a person is here and they're just, whatever their environment and their conditioning is will directly translate into who they are. And that's true on many levels. But I think there's an essence of what somebody is. You've met some child somewhere who comes from the same family as another loving family, but they're, just a deeply loving child who is just, they're just different than other people. They're different than others, and we need to recognize that there are different souls that within us. There are different kinds of people. Some are maybe perhaps more loving, and some are perhaps a little bit more confused or darker. It's all different levels of consciousness that are here, coming back and forth, trying to relearn experiences and trying to ultimately reach that highest state of being that you can.
What is the highest state of being to you?
Well, that's a really good question. If anybody's seen the movie Lucy, there's some interesting aspects in that where reaching 100% state of brain capacity could just literally disappear and turn the matter into something where you couldn't literally not even see it anymore, where you could control matter. And so it becomes a situation where what is enlightened? What is the enlightened point? What's the point where you can say you become that enlightened being? I don't know, and maybe we're not supposed to know, because that's how important we are. Maybe our highest state hasn't even been made available to us yet because of everything we've gone through. And I believe that we have a lot of incredible things that are waiting for us in the future if we can get through some very exciting and changeable times in the next few years.
I mean, we're certainly going through some fascinating times, and if you look at, we're either at the cusp of something great or something terrible. And I feel it's up to people like yourself and others, many that listen to Leak Project here are so well educated, astute, and awake. It's nice to know there's people out there that are in the know. It's funny, Matt, because I took Uber home the other day because my car's in the shop, and the guy that picked me up was a real nice gentleman. He started talking about how he has it's weird how I bump into people that have like these top security clearances with the military or whatever. I'm like a magnet to these people somehow.